Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute history videos. And today I'm at a rest stop off of I-68 just outside of Hancock in western Maryland, and specifically I'm at the Sideling Hill rest stop. The road here goes on to Cumberland and then Morgantown, West Virginia. And if you have ever driven through here and you've driven through this enormous cut in the hillside in the Allegheny Mountains, you have had to wonder what is going on, this incredible strata of swooping rocks. Where did they come from? How were they made? At least that's what I've been thinking for a while. So that's what this video is going to be about. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, Johns, you're with Baltimore Heritage, not Hancock Heritage. What's going on? Well, if we turn the clock back 240 million years or so, the rocks that are underneath my feet right now would have been underneath my house in Bolton Hill, and maybe your house too. So there's the connection. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's talk about the road first. There have been people crossing over Sideling Hill for eons. A young George Washington crossed over here using a footpath made by Native Americans years and years before when he went to fight the French in the French and Indian Wars. During the railroad days, there was a tunnel cut through Sideling Hill by the East Broad Top Railroad Company. None other than the Vanderbilt Railroad family started to build a railroad here. It got sidetracked when a foreman was killed in an explosion. But in addition to the railroads, there has been a road through here for a long time. Route 40, the national road from the early 1800s, came through here. We did a video on that a little earlier. You can check that out. But in 1965, things began in earnest for this part of the interstate and for Sideling Hill. That's when Congress passed something called the Appalachian Regional Development Act. There were a number of towns here in western Maryland and West Virginia that were little small industrial bases that took a nosedive a little bit after World War II, and the idea was to revive tourism and the economies of these towns using the road as the catalyst. Route 40 was also a problem for a number of reasons. One, it was a two-lane road, essentially kind of a small two-lane road. Two is in places like Cumberland, it went through the middle of the town and traffic would snarl up with trucks and cars. And at least if you were a legislator from West Virginia, the problem with Route 40 was that it went through Pennsylvania, not to West Virginia. So the idea for this road began at first as a state highway called the Cumberland Thruway. And in fact, the first section was a bridge over downtown Cumberland, diverting traffic from its main street. From the very beginning, there were some protests. From 1976 through 1986, citizens sued to try to get the highway to not go through the Green Ridge State Park. They ultimately lost, but their protests got the highway planners to divert the road to have a less of an impact on the forest. And if you're ever driving through here, I encourage you to stop at the Green Ridge Overlook. Take a look out there. That's the forest that the citizens here in western Maryland saved. The road was completed in 1991, but not as a mere state highway, but as Interstate 68. And being an interstate, it was bigger, it was wider, and it had to meet the grade specifications, so it didn't have such a steep downhill grade, thus the cut in the side of the mountain. So to create this notch, we used 2,600 tons of explosion to get rid of 10 million tons of rocks. Geologists tell us what was going on here is that about 240 million years ago, the continent of Africa collided with the continent of North America, sending rocks westward for about 100 miles. I checked my odometer before we left Baltimore, and it was 111 miles from there to here. So that's why I'm pretty confident that at one point, if we were in Baltimore 240 million years ago, we would have begun our very slow but westward journey out here to Hancock. So this notch is one of the really great geological attractions on the East Coast, and it's got a couple things that are pretty cool about it. One is that it is something called a syncline. When those two continents came together, here the earth buckled, but not upward, it buckled inward towards itself. That's pretty cool. It's also something called a topographic inversion. So when that syncline happened, the hard rocks got pushed to the bottom, but over time, as erosion happened on the sides rocks eroded away, leaving this ridge line of hard rocks down the middle. And in fact, Sideling Hill is a ridge that extends up into Pennsylvania. Two more quick neat things. One is if you look at the strata, the layer about 70 feet up, it's something that geologists call a diamictite. I hope I got that right. It's a specific mix of clay and sand and pebbles that's pretty unusual, and at least as far as we can tell, nobody knows for sure how it got there. And then the final thing that's really neat, especially now when the temperature is about 0, it is really cold out here, is that there are enormous icicles. What happens in the summer and spring and fall when it's warm is water flows down through, and all those little synclines have V's in them in each strata, and the water hits the V and then flows out to where we blasted the side of the mountain out and then trickles down. In the summer and spring and fall it's water, but here in the winter, and if you're following along real time, we are definitely in the middle of winter. They form enormous majestic icicles. So I'm going to wrap up. Encourage you, next time you're anywhere out near this western Maryland, out here in Hancock, take a moment and stop, come out to the rest stop, explore this mountain, and maybe go back to Hancock, to the museum, the Hancock Museum, and learn more about it. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.